Welcome back, warriors, to the worst fighting game. My divine struggle to dethrone Criticom, Expect No Mercy, from its lofty position at the zenith of the fighting game stink pile. Since we are starting a new chapter in this ongoing saga, I figured it would be vaguely appropriate to kick things off with a franchise that knows sagas all too well, and especially on not knowing when to finally conclude them. Isn't that right, Toriyama?
They drove a dump truck full of money up to my house. I'm not made of stone.
When we last went a few rounds with Dragon Ball Z, we did so with the much maligned Taiketsu, which was made by a Western team under great duress. But this time, we'll be taking a swing at DBZ Ultimate Battle 22, which is always in the conversation when talking about the dregs of Dragon Ball Z fighters and games in general. When originally released in 1995, a lot of children/teenagers of the future instead experienced it in 2003, which greatly contributed to, well, its horrible reputation. But is that enough to send Expect No Mercy into the next dimension? Or will we be able to judge this time capsule of a game with eyes unclouded by hate? Oh wait, that's a Mononoke reference, never mind. Anyway, we won't know for sure until we get it in the ring. Ultimate Battle 22 is something of a spin-off from the Super Butoden series, and shares a lot, but not all, of the same gameplay as the previous entries, and in fact was originally called Dragon Ball Z Super Butoden PlayStation version before it got rebranded as the slightly more catchy Ultimate Battle 22. Now, everything under the classic Butoden umbrella was all developed by Tosei, who you might be familiar with, even if you don't think you are, but please allow me to explain. Now, I don't have time to count them all, but I think Tosei might have had a hand in creating every video game ever. They developed Yoshi's Cookie, The Legend of Starfree, Toxic Crusaders, the entire Bases Loaded series, Kid Icarus on the Game Boy, 2 GBA Shrek titles, Resident Evil Survivor, Resident Evil Revelations, yes, those two very different things are made by the exact same studio, and most recently co-developed Crisis Core Reunion with Square Enix, so they are nothing if not eclectic. Ultimate Battle 22 also represents the first time they worked on the PlayStation, and it certainly shows in a number of ways. A mix of 2D sprites and 3D backgrounds, and a rather big departure from how long-distance DBZ-style battles usually played out. In the older Butoden games, the screen real estate would split when fighters got too far away from each other, which was a pretty neat thing to see in 16-bit games at the time, but was then changed to whatever this was. Now, there were a number of other changes made to the presentation and gameplay, which we'll get into, but this was the big one, and Japanese Butoden fans did not like it. So, a few months later, Tosei released a definitive version, but for the Sega Saturn, and called it Shin Butoden, which we sadly never got in the West. This port used the exact same roster and sprites, brought back the old camera system, added in a much-needed story mode, as well as far more aesthetically pleasing backgrounds. Now, the PlayStation Ultimate Battle 22 did see a limited release in Europe in 1996, where it received a few fair reviews, but it was largely forgotten about soon after. Where its infamy truly lies is in its inexplicable 2003 re-release, where it finally instant transmissioned. Well, not instant, 8-year transmissioned into North American store shelves, and was again exclusive to the then very outdated PS1. Now, why did this happen? Well, because Infogrames/Atari/Funimation were most likely desperate for more Dragon Ball products in the wake of the franchise's early 2000s boom in the West.
I never thought I'd die alone.
DBZ Budokai had sold gangbusters the year before, and Ultimate Battle 22 happened to be one of the last few unlocalized games for consoles that still had large active fan bases. Yeah, sorry Sega Saturn. The problem is that Atari and Funimation did the bare minimum in updating this release. 0 gameplay changes, no English voices, same ugly menus, but they still found time to add a few new errors, so this was indeed a dirty deed done very cheaply. Moreover, given that this was nearly a decade old by 2003 and the public had played the crap out of Budokai, it's no surprise that video game outlets had buried it. 1s from EGM, 20 out of 100 from the official PlayStation magazine, and a truly damning review from then GameSpot personality Ryan Davis, RIP, saying, "A really, really terrible game, and it always has been. In fact, it's so bad that a longer review would only give the game more validation, which it simply does not deserve." So let's start playing it! The opening intro of Ultimate Battle 22 is fine, serviceable even. I mean, it's no patch on the one in Final Bout, but yeah, that's the entirety of my thought. As already stated, the menus are a forgettable mishmash of styles that don't really exude DBZ, but all of that is the preamble to one of the worst character select screens I've ever seen in a long, commie damn time. I mean, just look at it. I can kind of see what they're going for, but you can't just highlight the fighter in the way you'd expect. You have to cycle through each row, which is not how they appear to be grouped visually. And when you do finally find the character you want, they pop out in front of the others, obscuring them, which really isn't needed. It's a small thing, sure, but it's not the best way to kick things off. Now, each bout starts with pre-fight conversations between every character, and while they're not elaborately animated, they're still a decent way of setting the tone. Which is something I would be saying to you if I was reviewing the 1995 Japanese original version. Since Funimation and Infogrames had no interest in spending any additional money, instead of localizing these convos with voice or even just text, they chopped them out of the game completely. Nice! And now we have the actual game, and they certainly went for a specific look here. The sprites do appear as if they were lifted straight from the show, or more accurately, a degraded VHS tape recorded off an early 90s TV broadcast of the show. Now, I respect using hardware to achieve a radical new visual identity, but I don't think it worked out here. I'd much rather have more dynamic and detailed original sprites rather than trying to replicate a super low-res facsimile of the source material. You stack this up against, say, Hyperdimension, and I'll pick the latter every time. Animation is also similarly limited here, as it's a well-known fact that the PlayStation wasn't the most ideal machine for 2D fighting games, as evidenced by a bunch of frames being cut out of several Capcom and SNK titles. So what that means is that this winds up giving the entire roster this stiff, basic look, but honestly, this stuff looks like Third Strike when compared to the backgrounds. For whatever reason, Tosei went with 3D here, a choice so baffling that it renders me speechless. Out of like the 20 or whatever episodes I've done, I honestly feel these are the worst stage backgrounds that my poor eyes have ever been subjected to. I mean, Fight for Life was somehow less egregious, and that's partially because DBZ locales are iconic. You know what they're supposed to look like, and these barely resemble them. What's intended to be a vast canyon environment looks like you're fighting on a moldy block of cheese, and the hyperbolic time chamber doesn't even seem to be finished. Look at it. It's just a gray, untextured void. Like, I know that's what the stage is supposed to kind of be, but this is just lazy. What's fortunately not lazy is the roster, which is as good as you could hope for in 1995, although it's a little lacking for 2003, and it has its own particularities. In my opinion, including Goten, Kid Trunks, and Gotenks all as separate characters is a little superfluous, but what's worse is no Yamcha! Come on, how am I supposed to make a Crater reference now? Yeah, here's a raw one anyway. Another slightly smaller knock against the presentation is the lack of any win screen. The characters barely animate once the match is over, none of them say anything, and it doesn't even display like Piccolo wins or something. It just fades out almost immediately. Also, not exclusive to this game, but the UI is repeatedly ruined by all the TMs and Rs on each and every character name. That stuff just always brings me one step closer to the edge. The weirdness with the roster doesn't stop there. Infogrames was in such a hurry to get this out the door that they slapped Kid Buu and Mystic Gohan on the North American cover, despite neither appearing in any version of the game, which is the most Infogrames thing ever. Imagine if Capcom put Maki on the cover of Street Fighter V, but never included her in-game in any form. I would send a strongly worded tweet. Now, if you are one of the 3 people who hasn't figured it out yet, the 22 in Ultimate Battle 22 represents the playable cast, except that's a massive lie. There's actually 27 characters, as you can unlock an additional 5, which really makes that title screen... Oh, that's kinda cool actually. You know what's less cool though? One of those unlockables. Yeah, there's Roshi, Mr. Kid Goku, and Super Saiyan 3 Goku, that's all fine. The issue is with the last one, Gogeta, Vegito, or do I? Apparently, but I'm not sure how accurate this is, since Funimation hadn't yet dubbed Movie 12 at that point, they didn't want to spoil this fusion for Western fans, so they just renamed him Vegito, while in the Japanese version, he's Gogeta. Now, you'd think that would be that, but no, the Dragon Hole goes even deeper. Once you unlock these characters, you get an additional intro animation that shows Vegeta and Goku using the Potara earrings to transform, not the fusion dance, so both versions have it wrong. And lastly, this character, whoever he is, can perform one of Vegito's signature moves. What the hell? I mean, Hiffle! Ultimate Battle 22 is a 6-button game. Kinda. You have buttons for punching, kicking, flying, and a dedicated one for projectiles. The other 2 mystery buttons let you dash forward and backwards, which I admit is handy and lets you zip around the screen pretty effortlessly. You also have throws, the ability to deflect projectiles, put up energy shields, meteor attacks, and each character has their own unique special moves, so there's certainly some stuff here, far more than what was in Taiketsu, for example. While the stiff animation and lack of combos is an issue, really it's the flying that drags the experience down. Tosei replaced the snappy camera system from the prior Butodens and decided things would look better like this, which they absolutely do not. Maybe the PlayStation couldn't handle what the Super Nintendo could do, I don't know, but regardless, this is what they chose, and as mentioned, they ran that shit back for the later Saturn port. Moving on, like many other DBZ games, using key attacks drains your meter, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I've resigned to accept it, as it's a series trope. So while nothing within the gameplay is amazing or anything you haven't seen before, it's nowhere near the worst, and I'd say Taiketsu easily outshitties it. So let's wrap up with the modes, cause there's not much to say. There's Versus, a tournament battle that's actually a tournament battle, and the weird build-up stuff. This lets you level up whatever character you want, which increases their health and damage, and that's it. You don't get new moves or attacks, you can just fight as a slightly more powerful version of yourself. As stated earlier, if you want a proper story mode, go for Shin Butoden, not this, because Ultimate Battle barely even has an arcade mode. There's only Versus CPU, which forces you to fight all 22 characters in a row before you can see your chosen Z fighter's ending. Now let's talk about those endings, shall we? Oh wait, there aren't any. After all this wonky shit in the presentation and modes, it's somewhat of a relief that Ultimate Battle 22 handles mercifully okay. The floaty jumps, rigid animation, and how clunky the flying mechanics feel are all obviously negatives, but they hardly make it worse fighting game material. The dashing is responsive, and most of the special moves and supers have a good amount of impact. It's just that the other stuff in the game surrounding it brings it all down into a stinky bio-Broly-esque sludge. But when considering all these factors, where does that ultimately put Ultimate Battle 22? Will the Z Fighters be able to defeat the evil and incompetent Expect No Mercy? When will I dispense with this overused DBZ trope? Well, right now. Cue the transition. This is one of those very rare cases where presentation is paramount. Dragon Ball is, let's not kid ourselves, a legendary franchise. So despite a solid roster, seeing the rest of the game being riddled with so many mistakes, omissions, and cut corners is a massive letdown. The horribly realized backgrounds, threadbare content, and lack of care are all evidence to that. And again, the Saturn version fixed a number of these issues, so it invalidates this PlayStation Edition's existence. If Funimation and Infogrames had just left Sleeping Saiyans lie, then Ultimate Battle would have gone relatively unnoticed, but they just had to take out that dragon radar to find something they could hawk to the starved fanbase. So even with all that said, we do need to place this in our tier list of trash, and since I morally, and I don't even think legally, can rate this lower than Taiketsu, it'll just have to settle for the ever-crowded, fairly stinky gulag. And with that, I think we've expectedly extinguished another one of Expect No Mercy's enemies. And if you out there would like to nominate any other possible contenders to its crown of crap, do let me know in the comments below or sound the battle gong over on my Twitter. Until then, I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game. Welcome, warriors, to another blood and miscellaneous fluid-soaked episode of The Worst Fighting Game, my never-ending quest to find the king of the crap, the emperor of excrement, and the lord of limpness when it comes to what else but the mighty fighting game. With Expect No Mercy, an unashamed Mortal Kombat clone, currently being our smelliest overlord, I felt it was appropriate to now throw another clone into the ring to take it on, since Ultimate Battle 22 or 27 failed to do so. Now, as some of you may know, especially if you frequent my gameplay channel Flophouse Plays, I am no stranger to today's contestant, that being the 1996 classic WarGods. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean
Midway presents WarGods.
Yeah, that's right, you put respect on that name, it deserves it. So when I last went a few rounds with this one, I explained my undying and semi-ironic love for it, as it was Midway's attempt at producing a sister series to Mortal Kombat, the Darkstalkers to their Street Fighter, essentially. It didn't really work, but in contrast to certain people who approach WarGods from stubborn, closed-minded perspectives, I decided to employ some due diligence and uncover a bit of the development mythology behind these all-powerful deities. George Petro, who worked on WarGods as the co-lead, was kind enough to speak to me regarding how it all came to be. In the early 90s, the team George was a part of was developing a multiplayer 3D tank game when they happened to receive a tape with footage of a then unknown title coming out of Japan, something called virtual fighting? It goes without saying, but their hats literally hit the ceilings, and they immediately decided to scrap their tank game and drastically change course. This refocusing took quite a bit of time, however, as they had to switch over to the same 3D technology that powered Cruisin' USA and, needed to become familiar with fighting game design. See, the team that made WarGods was largely composed of either new staff or those who worked on other genres at Midway, so there was quite a bit for them to come to grips with. Meanwhile, the Mortal Kombat team were pretty busy developing MK3 via the reliable digitization process, so they had no time for this polygon shit and thus wouldn't be much help. This divide did instill a bit of tension within the company, as MK was one of Midway's biggest cash cows, so for a bunch of outsiders to take a crack at another fighting game altogether was seen as a bit of a slight. Ed Boon has gone on record several times, even dating back to 1997, that there were zero developmental links between Mortal Kombat and WarGods, as MK4 was made on an entirely new arcade board dubbed Zeus, whereas WarGods used that aforementioned Cruisin' USA tech. In fact, the only assets shared by both series were martial arts actors. Brian Glynn and Carrie Hoskins, who played Shao Kahn and Sonya Blade, also pulled double duty as Warhead and Vala. The WarGods team had to do a lot of problem solving on the fly, as this was their first 3D game, and as George Petro explained, the process used to create the roster of gods wasn't typical. Human characters were costumed and then digitized. Meanwhile, a 3D version was built and mapped with the digitized photos. Each character was actually motion captured, a first for Midway at the time, and the animations were exported as a series of meshes. The game program could interpolate between the meshes, so storage requirements were lowered. This was quite a bit of work, having to dress up actors in costumes, photographing them from every angle, and do motion capture, sort of like Mortal Kombat, but then having to apply that data to 3D models, which was a pretty untested and rare method in the mid-90s. Unfortunately, this process wasn't exactly a refined method, as it resulted in a stiff, awkward look that many have pointed out as one of the game's shortcomings. One of those other shortcomings was the game's delay in getting to market, because once it finally did release in late 1996, the arcade scene was already flooded with tons of better-looking competition, which George felt hurt WarGods' chances to make an impact. There are always a lot of factors that play into how a game is received. Of course, the fact that it was a fighting game coming from Midway and not named MK was disappointing to the market. It was actually Tekken 2 that caused most of the problems. It came out before us. That game was so cool and we were just not that cool. If we could rewind the clock, as soon as we saw Tekken 2, we should have scrapped the mesh idea and redone everything with articulated skeletons. That's where the fighting world was headed, and we were behind the times. Oh well, live and learn. So, WarGods didn't become the hit that Midway was hoping for, and in fact became something of a laughingstock for a number of years. Or let's be real, decades. So it's up to me to see if that reputation does indeed precede it, and if it has a chance to dethrone our champion.
I have seen the amateur, and it is you!
Yes, thank you. And there's no better way to do that than taking a good hard look at the... I'll make no apologies for saying this, but WarGods tickles all the dumb 90s centers of the brain that it should. Blood and gore, an announcer screaming at you, cyborgs, monsters, aliens, magic, and one of the most over-the-top versus screens of all time. Roll the clip! Here we go. Wait for it! Yo, let's go! Perhaps at the time of its release, this might have been seen as pretty par for the course, but nowadays, I think it's the perfect pastiche of the age, and is so very unabashedly Midway. This doesn't mask the obvious flaws though. The titular WarGods do have a wobbly, odd look to them, and are even weirder when they start moving and running, an obvious side effect of the process used to create them. Design-wise, well, they're a pretty mixed bag. While Anubis, Voodoo, and Vala are pretty solid in what you'd expect, the majority of the cast fails to make much of an impression. Your basic gladiator, homeless-looking robot guy, and BDSM madame. This also extends over to the bosses. There's Big Green Guy and other Big Green Guy. When I think a bit harder about this premise though, it really does seem like a missed opportunity, you know? A game where a pantheon of deities are throwing hands makes me feel like they should have considered an alternative roster, you know? Yeah, let's just move on. Audio-wise, things are much more consistent. There's a big bombastic sound to everything, from the voice clips to the death screams, music, and of course that charismatic announcer.
Pagan wins. Perfect victory.
Also, for those that are waiting with bated breath, yes, the most important aspect of any fighting game, the endings are confirmed. Repeat, confirmed to be present in WarGods. While it would have been great to see them attempt something a bit more ambitious like full 3D cutscenes or CGI clips, they did have the hard drive space after all, they default to just using classic MK stills. None of the endings are stuff that'll make you gasp with the revelations contained within, but hell, we've covered a number of fighters that didn't even bother with endings in any form. So, off the bat, WarGods at least does the basic presentation stuff correctly. I will say that in general, like George mentioned, visuals like this were definitely lagging behind Tekken 2, Soul Blade, and pretty much everything coming out of AM2. Hell, even Atari's 3D FX powered medieval fighter Mace outclassed WarGods without breaking a sweat, but really, the presentation isn't the issue here. That lies more in the The WarGods team decided their safest bet, since they had so much to figure out on their own, was to just ape what Midway was known for, and that was, well, Mortal Kombat. Despite them adding a number of other gameplay flourishes and additions, which I'll get into, overall, WarGods rigidly stuck with a near identical button format, highs and lows for punches and kicks, which could then result in sweeps, uppercuts, and roundhouses. This feels so incredibly similar to how MK plays that I can totally see how it might instantly turn some people off, and this isn't because it's a bad format, it's just because it's the exact same thing, just slightly worse because it plays in kinda janky semi-3D. There are some differences I have to highlight though, with the first being that despite WarGods being a 6-button game like MK3 and 4, there's no run button, which is because it's done by simply double tapping. That 6 button is instead dedicated to the act of literally defying all laws of reality by stepping into a perplexing new dimension. Pressing this big green glowing sumbitch lets you circle around your opponent and avoid pretty much every projectile. To combat that design decision, every character was also given a 3D attack that has an AoE effect, which then counters the sidestep. In theory, of course. Also, not so fun fact, since the arcade cab's 3D button had a big ass light in it, it would get incredibly hot to the touch. I love that, that's classic Midway. But that's not the entirety of what WarGods does that's new. You can perform a very rude shove to your opponent, which is done by pressing block twice, stomp attacks when they're on the ground, and both defensive and offensive options when waking up. None of this comes off as particularly useful though, as just uppercutting, sweeping, and performing dial combos are a much quicker way to victory. Still though, I think WarGods should still get a bit of credit for adding these other mechanics. It's just that they don't quite do enough to distinguish it from On that same subject, there's the finishing moves, which, while on the surface play out exactly as you'd expect, they do have some nuance that I think some of you may have forgotten about, or didn't know in the first place. Each character does have their one unique fatality, where the announcer literally says, "Fatality!" with a bunch of them being mid as hell, but there are a few, like Voodoos or Aokins, which raise the bar in terms of violence. What's unexpectedly sick, though, is that WarGods actually offers a few other stylish ways to end each bout. If you uppercut or roundhouse when prompted, you're treated to a crazy animation of your defeated foe flying off into the distance. or the camera cutting to a fun angle to show them falling back down to the arena floor. These are actually dependent on the stage you do them on, like whether or not they have a ceiling, for example. This is great if you can't remember a specific fatality command or are just tired of seeing the same one over and over. On top of that, there's one other way to finish him, and that's your character's 10-string. Punch in another command and you'll launch into a mini ultra combo, which is pretty satisfying. These are all cool things, but as cool as they are, it still doesn't change the fact that the moment-to-moment gameplay is still a bit too familiar, a bit too clunky, and a bit too WarGodsy. Now, we usually talk about the modes by this point in the video, which we will do so now, cause it'll just take a second. The arcade version obviously has an arcade ladder with a second player able to jump in at any time, while the home ports offered the exact same thing. Look, I know Eurocom was super busy with various console versions of Midway stuff at the time, but really? No practice, no tag team, no survival, just nothing else, huh? I think if they had been given the opportunity, time, and money to flesh the game out with some additional stuff like, I don't know, God Ball mode, I think it could have at least made the home version stand out a bit more. As it is, what's being offered here in terms of game modes would be an insult to any self-respecting god, and I really can't defend it, so why don't we just move on to the... As I've already hinted at once or twice, WarGods lacks a certain flow and elegance to it. This is due to a combination of the mesh-based animation system, MK-style gameplay, and the bumbling 3D nature of the sidestepping. It just feels like a bunch of separate elements that don't exactly mix together all that well. I gotta give big ups though. The game is fast as fuck, boy, and once you start to get used to its awkward feel and know a few good moves, you can certainly have a bit of fun, despite what some slander-slinging detractors might say. Like, next time I'm on Triple KO, I'm gonna virtually punch him in the back of his head.
There's a lot of questions about like,
I've played a good dozen or more fighters on this very show, let alone in my lifetime, that feel far sludgier than WarGods. While I'm not gonna say controlling this lumbering mound of rocks or this stinky, toxic Screaming Man feels good, it could certainly feel worse. In fact, that's an accurate description that you could lobby at the game in general. It could be worse. Hell, you might as well just slap that on the box art. With all that said, I'm left in a weird place here where I'm not 100% sure which pedestal these gods should be placed upon, so I just bring in the logo and let's see where it falls.
Judgment.
All throughout the 90s, and well into the 2000s, WarGods accrued a pretty horrendous reputation, but I think its mediocreness was highlighted and propped up when people compared it, a bit unfairly, to Mortal Kombat's massive success. If this had been released by, like, I don't know, Data East or Incredible Technologies, I don't think it would have been nearly as reviled. Going back to it again for the purposes of this video has only reconfirmed that. It plays tighter than many other MK clones I've brought into this ring already. Kasumi Ninja, Way of the Warrior, the other one, and of course, EXPECT No Mercy. It does make you think if the team behind it had gotten a second chance to make a turbo version or a sequel, it could have actually been a thing. Or maybe not, I don't know. Taking all of this into account, I think WarGods manages to avoid the fetid waves of odor emanating off the fairly stinky tier. So Street Fighter the movie, arcade version, give a hearty thumbs up to your new neighbor. And with that, another bloody battle to determine the God King of Garbage has come to a close. And if you out there know of any other contenders you'd like me to throw into the ring, hit me up in the comments below or sound the gong over on my Twitter. Until then, Warriors, I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game. Welcome back, Warriors, to another episode of the Worth You Know the Deal. Criticom was bad, Expect No Mercy was worse, so I now find myself elbow deep in the garbage juice to plumb the fetid depths even further. And while we've squared off against a number of games that, in one way or another, have tried to ape much bigger fighting franchises, there have been some specific offenders in the annals of fighting gamedom that are far more infamous than the ones I've featured on this show. Allow me to introduce the Masters Fighter, not to be confused with the Genesis Classic Fighting Masters, an arcade and PlayStation 2D button basher that is both simultaneously obscure as all hell and well known amongst the purveyors of the genre's deepest, darkest circles. While it's certainly low quality by all possible metrics, the Masters Fighter, God, that's so awkward to say, goes above and beyond most games that I've tackled before in a few key areas. But will that secret sauce be enough to blast Expect No Mercy from atop its lofty throne? Well, we won't find out until we get it in the ring. Okay, so if you assume that something that looks like this doesn't have an interesting history, well, you'd be wrong, because the story of this one goes a lot deeper than it should. In 1995, a South Korean company by the name of Unico developed a game called Masters Fury, which was distributed in arcades by another mysterious company, Game Tech. No, not that Game Tech, another Game Tech. Upon its release, it was spectacularly ignored by pretty much everyone who saw it, or didn't in this case. Now, we all know that companies were pumping out fighting games by the dozens to capitalize on Street Fighter II's success in the early 90s, but this was 1995, so Masters Fury was striking precisely when the iron was cooling off, while 3D fighters were just heating up. So it's no surprise that something that never tried to be anything more than an overt Street Fighter and SNK clone failed to resonate, especially when just the quickest glance to its gameplay would absolutely confirm that. Every single master was quite obviously pieced together from a variety of other sources, with the most flagrant of those sources coming from Art of Fighting, along with a healthy dash of a few others. Upon Unico's failure to generate any significant profits from this arcade release, they decided to try their luck on console. Somehow, they were able to convince Sony Computer Entertainment to allow them to release their rip-off at their homage on the PlayStation. But this wasn't Masters Fury, no, this was the Masters Fighter. It's got different character names and portrait art, a new intro, some tweaks to the sprites, completely different select screen and UI, obviously the title, but I'm not really sure why any of this was done. Maybe Unico thought some companies might get a little suey over some of the stuff in Masters Fury, but that doesn't make any sense either, because some of these edits actually make things even dicier in a legal sense. To make this port possible, Unico teamed up with another company, Cinema Supply, to publish this thing for a November 1997 PlayStation release. Just imagine trying to convince someone with no prior knowledge of this whole debacle that this was a legit official game released on the PlayStation in 97. Ah, massacre! To try and understand the intention here, why don't we just turn to the manufacturer's notes that came with this version of the game. Let's see here. Yes, okay. Was very popular in America and Europe, Masters Fury, but now the PlayStation Masters Fighter released as a remake. So that confirms it then. This is somehow a remake that's way worse than the original in every way, but okay, what else does it say? Big scale character made? Overseas, worth a look, just gorgeous background. Dasanai animation sensation in 3D, sensation of continuous attack. Also introduces double the exhilaration of a reversal super mortal Ichida and more. Features, third-person perspectives, 2D graphics, cartoon graphics, and fighting theme. So I hope that clears things up. Obviously, the Masters Fighter on the PlayStation didn't do much for Unico either, but they did seem to finally achieve some success with the Silk Road series of beat-em-ups, which I can't say I've played, because they look like this. Now, before we move on to the... No, not yet. There's one last thing I wanted to mention that should bring everything to focus for any of you out there that are currently asking, well, what's going on? Why is this game like this? If the name Unico sounds familiar at all, it's because it was attached to another legendary fighting game, that being Dragon Master. Yes, this milestone of early YouTube content creation was also developed by them, and it also traced over the sprites and animation patterns from other, much more notable franchises. Never change, Unico. Oh wait, you can't because you went out of business decades ago. To complement its terrible gameplay, Masters Fighter doesn't disappoint with its equally terrible visuals, which, while initially being easy to brush off by just saying they're terrible, it isn't the whole story. Even though it was dated by 1995 arcade standards and could hardly be called bleeding edge, Masters Fury is still incalculably better looking than its PlayStation remake. The menus, the select screens, the fonts, everything about the UI is absolute clown shoes. Yo, shoutouts to these early Photoshop textures. But it's obviously the sprites which took the biggest hit. Even though the PlayStation could handle things like Alpha 3, JoJo, Marvel vs. Capcom, and a bunch of later KOFs and SAM shows, albeit with some animation cuts, for some reason, Masters Fighter looks like this. It's just inexcusable. The comparison I want to make here, just my gut instinct, but I think you'll agree, is that this game renders out sprites like the zoomed out versions you see in early SNK games, but instead of being temporary and having a cool cinematic flair to them, it's just all the fucking goddamn time. Like, why? Why is it like this? Is it a bug? This might be the ugliest 2D fighting game I've ever seen, and I've seen Human Killing Machine. It's so egregious it actually affects the gameplay in that it makes it hard to even discern what certain characters are doing at any given time. It's actually stunning in a way. With that in mind, you shouldn't be too surprised by the backgrounds, which have seen big cuts in animation, detail, and a bunch of wholesale on-screen elements just being cut, which I guess is expected. There are like 1 or 2 stages that are kind of cute, I guess, like this hotel lobby. I don't know, it's kind of neat. There's a comforting vibe here. And endings are confirmed. I repeat, confirmed. And honestly, they're probably the highlight of this whole fiasco, because they're stuffed to the gills with so much English, they will surely elicit a sensible chuckle at the very least, and a hearty knee slapper at most. So, here's but a sampler. Mr. Death defeated 2660. Ha! He's no match for me. I have no long have use for you. Even they cannot stop me. Tainted with blood, this fist. My cursed, this destiny. Then, till the end of this life of mine. An ogre, a demon. I shall become those who stand before me. I shall kill away. Thereafter, he once again disappears into the darkness of the city. Did you get all that? With that insanity coating our brains, let me follow it up with the roster because, well, I still have so many sights to show you. First, we have Long, or Lee from World Heroes, Takuya, or Kim/Rio from both Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting, Kang T. Kung, or Tung Fu Ru, Michelle, or Yuri, Gamp, or I don't know who this guy's ripping off, Kane, or Geese Howard, Sakamoto, or Jubei Yagyu. Then there's Bill, or Jack, Azarl, or Mr. Big/John/Guile, Jay, probably the most unique character of the bunch, although that hair is very Benimaru. Then the previously mentioned Mr. Death, who is simply just, I don't know, like 3 Art of Fighting characters at once. Then we finally end on T660, who is just Choi from KOF, but somehow even more Freddy-like. As you can see, doing their own thing wasn't really Unico's thing. I mean, sure, a lot of their characters in Dragon Master at least looked a little more original, but a ton of their moves and animation frames were not, which is a tradition that continues on in Masters Fighter, which of course brings us to the... Oh wait, what's happening? I didn't ask for... Guile Winquote from the YouTube channel Guile Winquote. Are you here to take over the task of explaining the Masters Fighter's mechanics or lack of mechanics?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm here for. But I won't lie, Matt, this was a tough one to learn, because once you've played enough fighting games, you can kind of just look at a fighter and know whether it's going to play well or not. And I don't think you need to be Daigo to realize that the Masters Fighter is a bit rough around the edges. But we gotta cut it some slack, okay? Because the fighting game genre was still going through growing pains when it released, because every company was trying to innovate on the genre. Wait, this isn't one of the first fighting games ever?
Nope.
This was released in 1997, the same year that Tekken 3 and Vampire Savior came out.
That is correct.
Okay, that changes things. Let's rip into this. The Masters Fighter plays horribly and straight up ignores almost every single convention that makes the fighting game genre work on a fundamental level. And trust me, I mean fundamental. Even just walking in this game feels sluggish, and when you jump, your character either moves in slow motion or way too fast to react to anything. There are only 4 buttons, a light and hard punch and kick, but they feel super laggy, have no impact, and also just don't make any sense. There are seemingly no mid attacks in Masters Fighter, so all crouching buttons will hit an opponent who's blocking while standing, even if it's visually goofy. Overheads are nothing new in fighting games, but have you ever seen an underhead? And then there's the special moves, which, first of all, you can't even find out how to do them online. Do you know how bad a game has to be for there not to be one single soul out there who's bothered to put out a move list? Even Dino Rex has a move list online. Secondly, all of the special moves I could find are just awful, because they're super awkward and they do no chip damage, because of course this game doesn't have chip damage, so they offer no real advantage in neutral. Or at least they wouldn't if Masters Fighter wasn't the most backwards designed fighting game ever. Every single attack in Masters Fighter forces the opponent into a proximity guard state from anywhere on the screen. That means you can mash jab from full screen, and if the other player even thinks about walking back, they'll be stuck in place. This lets you go crazy on buttons and specials, cause the opponent either has an answer, and trust me, they won't because everything feels awful in this game, or they're just forced to stand there and hold it. This also breaks cross-ups, because if your opponent jumps over you with an attack, your character instantly blocks, but then turns around with them, meaning you have to block the incoming jump attack in the complete opposite direction that you would in every other single fighting game. But okay, we get it though. The Masters Fighter sucks and doesn't work, but at least there's probably some funny and broken combos in this game, right? The Fighter's Master.
The Masters Fighter.
What?
You mistakenly said the name in reverse. It doesn't matter.
Matt, who cares what this Art of Fighting wannabe is called? Because it has no cancel or juggle system at all. That means there are no crouching kicks into fireballs, or crazy dragon punch combos in the corner, or just fun combos in general. You just press buttons and spam special moves. This makes the Fighter's Master.
Masters Fighter.
Whatever, I don't care what it's called, because this game is worse than bad in my opinion, because it's just boring. With how hard they tried to rip off SNK's characters and aesthetic, you'd think they would have tried copying just a bit of their gameplay design too.
Yeah, I know, right? But in terms of the game feel, can you bring up the game feel bumper, please? Thank you. So, how does the Fighter's Masters Fury, whatever, how does it control its flow, the weight of the characters, the speed, etc.?
It feels disrespectful to the genre and all of the fighting games that came before it.
Okay, yeah, that checks out. Hey, thanks, Mr. Winquote, for stopping by. Because I sure didn't want to talk about the gameplay of fucking Fighting Masters.
Look, my whole thing is being positive towards fighting games, so please don't ask me to come on here again.
I hear that a lot. Wait, a last minute plug. Where can all the fine fight fans at home find you?
Well, for anyone who needs a palate cleanser after seeing one of the worst the fighting game genre has to offer, you can always swing by my channel to learn about some underappreciated fighting game gems.
Wait, I thought the Kosoge, the esports, the balance, the broken, I thought all fighting games are good.
Anyways, yeah, I'm out of here. Have fun with your bad games, Matt.
Fair enough. Okay, so where does that actually put us? Because there's a lot to dislike here. Lame characters, headache-inducing graphics, no real gameplay or mechanics, really? What does this have going for it? The English endings? I mean, that does count for something. Honestly, while the game does feel abysmal, I don't think it quite supplants Expect No Mercy, which is still in a whole other realm, so I think the crown is being kept for another day.
I have seen the amateur and it is you.
But that doesn't mean Fighter's Master, the Master's Fighter is getting off easy, because it's still quite potent in its tier as a Grand Master of Trash. Thanks again to Guile Winquote for entering our ring, and do check out his channel for a ton of great inside baseball content on this wonderfully wacky genre known as the Button Basher. With that said, Warriors, train hard until I return next time on the worst fighting game. Welcome, Warriors, once again to the worst fighting game, the endless tournament where I try to find something more maligned than our reigning champ, the illustrious, the disastrous Expect No Mercy.
I have seen the amateur.
Yes. This week, to properly give our champion a real workout, and because there's some new Transformers movie out, I don't know, I'm just going to see Spider-Verse a third time instead, we're going to be holding a 2-on-1 handicap match, pitting two distinct but similar games up against the champ in a clash of climactic crappiness. Now, who exactly is brave or devious enough to square up with the cheaply dressed martial artists of Expect No Mercy? Well, that would be the mighty McMuscles and the problematic Predacons, who both appeared in 1999/2000's Beast Wars Transmetals, or Beasties Transmetals, for all my fellow Canucks out there. Now, I'm going to be upfront here. Back in my short pants wearing days, I rented the N64 version from my local Buster of Blocks, just the one time, as I was so aghast at how abjectly terrible it was. I was a pretty big fan of the CGI show, you see, so being able to play as Dinobot, Inferno, or Rhinox had a definite appeal to me. Just imagine how disappointed I was. And it's with that piece of history which leads us to today, because this game, Beast Wars Transmetals, partially inspired the creation of this very show, along with Criticom, of course, because my flabber was fully gasted once I slapped this piece of slag into my N64 back in 2000. I remember hating the shit out of this thing as a kid, finding it a chaotic, ugly mess with no rhyme or reason to its gameplay, which quickly delegated it to the darkest recesses of my memory palace. Then, about a year ago, I found out there was a PlayStation version of the exact same concept, complete with a different roster, modes, and mechanics, which was quite shocking to me. So we have one version of a bad game I'm not familiar with at all, and one other that I'm way too familiar with, to the point that I wish I wasn't. But will these painful childhood memories be enough to snuff out the spark of Expect No Mercy? Well, we won't know for sure until we get Beast Wars Transmetals in the ring. Takara, the rights holders/creators of Transformers in Japan, published Transmetals in 1999, while Bay Area Multimedia, or BAM Entertainment, the publishers of much hot garbage throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, handled the North American distribution. To be fair to BAM, they also very occasionally picked up some decent stuff, like a few random Fire Pros, Way of the Samurai, and the PS2 classic Bujingai. As to who developed both versions of Transmetals, well, that's a bit more mysterious. Apparently, a studio named Locomotive handled the N64 version, but I thought they were just a localization company. But no, apparently they were the main studio, while another company by the name of Wave Edge were on PlayStation duties. But there was also a third company named,
Janasia.
Thank you, which is prominently shown in the opening boot up as well. Ganesia were actually the ones in charge of the localization though, I think, which is made up of former staff from Capcom, which is a pretty weird connection. It seems that Locomotive were responsible for a number of dismal Virtual Boy games before producing N64 titles like Aero Gauge and Penny Racers, which explains a lot, as we'll see. Wave Edge was a studio under the Takara umbrella already, and before they were consolidated and dissolved in the early 2000s, they also did let her rip on the PlayStation with one of the earlier Beyblade games. I mentioned Blockbuster earlier, if you'll recall, and that's because the N64 version was, for a time at least, a rental exclusive. Now, no hate on Final Fight Guy or ClayFighter Sculptor's Cut, but being a Blockbuster exclusive was a red or at least a pink flag, as it usually meant that a publisher had little to no faith that a particular game had a chance at recouping the costs of what it would have taken to distribute it to retail stores. Maybe because the PlayStation had such a commanding lead by 1999 that it was saved this particular shame, but only BAM Entertainment knows for sure. Now, around 2001, there was allegedly another Beast Wars game planned for the PS2 that has zero surviving media. In fact, we don't even know what genre it was going to be in before it was mysteriously canned. My theory? They were going to base it on Beast Machines, but once they actually saw Beast Machines, they noped out. I mean, wouldn't you? And really, that's the history of Beast Wars Transmetals, I think. Wait, no, there's also... No, that's not really a thing. Okay, look, I'm just trying to delay things a little bit, because I really don't want to have to start talking about the... Both the N64 and PlayStation versions have their own pros and cons, so let's go through them as fast as we can. The PlayStation has a bunch of authentic CGI clips that look exactly like the show, complete with voice acting, and hell, has a pretty banging intro as well. The N64, meanwhile, has none of that, and instead a lot of text. Like, yeah, that's a cart limitation, but damn, they couldn't have just recorded some extra voiceovers for these text crawls? Menus and UI are also pretty terrible no matter the version, but the PlayStation fares slightly better here, as it doesn't have all those annoying bleeps and bloops of the N64, which sound really, really out of place. Like, just listen to this. You might as well put in the splatting tomato sounds from the Ring game. Stages are also dishwater as fuck, but again, the PlayStation still has it a good deal better. The camera angle is a bit more interesting, there's actual hazards to avoid, and generally, there's more detail and stuff going on. The N64 has these giant smeared textures that are trying to approximate natural locales, but as you can see, they fail to do so. Now, you could argue that these backgrounds are pretty accurate to the show, which also had a ton of generic large expanses of grasslands and cliffs, but I'm just being really generous by saying that. Character models, I feel, is where the N64 has the edge. The overly shiny polygons the console was known for, I think better invokes the Beast Wars, or more specifically, the Transmetals aesthetic. The PlayStation models are fine, mind you, but some of them do look a little off, especially Cyber Donkey Kong here. Speaking of DK, let's go over the roster. You have 8 to select from, with 4 from each side, but for whatever reason, there's a few omissions in each. Both versions get Primal, Cheetor, Rat Trap, Tarantulas, and Megatron, but there's one swap on the Maximal side and 2 on the Predacons? The N64 gets Air Razor, whereas Silverbolt is a PlayStation exclusive. You can keep him. You get Waspinator and Pterosaur on the N64, but Quick Strike and Rampage on Sony's machine. There's also a few secret bonus characters, but on the N64 at least, these are glorified palette swaps with different voice lines and not wholly unique characters, which, yeah, is pretty lazy. Cheetor becomes Tigatron and Ravage, Tarantulas becomes Black Arachnia, but there's also a few other console exclusives, like Waspinator becoming Starscream, which I will admit is pretty cool and show accurate. Over on the PlayStation, Silverbolt can become Windrazor, whom I believe made their first appearance in this game, but I'm sure Mega fans will correct me. You always do! Finally, the N64 has a secret boss, Megatron X. Basically a super buff version with wings, a shiny Doral-esque makeover, 2 life bars, never has to leave robot mode, and yeah, he's pretty bullshit. Music is pretty forgettable as well, and yeah, that's all I have to say about it. But fortunately, in battle, there's enough voice quotes from every character and their original voice actor, thankfully a feature that's in both versions, which at least gives this whole affair a bit of authenticity.
Mission accomplished, Big Bot!
What? No! That was too easy.
Now, I know what you're all waiting for, the endings. Literally the most important facet of any good button basher. Beast Wars is a bit of a special case here, as the PlayStation version does not contain a straightforward arcade ladder, but rather a slightly more in-depth story mode that plays out on a map. You either choose between the Maximals or the Predacons and have to move around to different points on said map, eliminating any threats before you attempt to take on the opposing team's base. You do get endings here, but they just represent your chosen side and not the individual characters themselves, but it's still pretty cool that you can get a good or bad end depending on your actions. Transmetals' single-player portion on the N64 handles things more like you'd expect. Choose your Maximal or Predacon, defeat either Primal or Megs, and you're rewarded with your individual unique ending. It's a bit of a bummer, it's just text and doesn't even have associated visuals, but hey, if you want to know what Pterosaur would do if he won the Beast Wars, well, that option is there for you, if you want. But listen, there's no way around this. Despite all the similarities, overall the PlayStation version has much better production values across the board, and the general look of the gameplay is immediately more pleasing to the eye, while Beastie's 64 is less so. It barely looks finished even, it reminds me of some random video game a kid would be playing in the background of, I don't know, the Lawnmower Man. As we move on, you best strap yourselves in though, because this same gulf in quality is going to split further apart once I start breaking down the... Ooh boy. So, the gameplay of Beast Wars is a lot, while simultaneously being not nearly enough. You essentially have 3 modes you can transform into during a match: Beast Mode, Robot Mode, and Vehicle Mode. This is more apparent over on the N64 version, as indicated by the giant button prompts that are always on the screen, which is a bit of overkill, don't you think? Every button you press, regardless of the mode you're in, does something similar but different. It's a bunch of vague lasers, missiles, and area of effect shield blasts that don't make for much of an impression. In Beast Mode, you get a melee attack but less projectiles. In Robot Mode, you're overall pretty powerful, but you can't stay in it for very long due to the influx of energon in the surrounding area. Then there's Vehicle Mode, which is literally just
Fast as fuck, boy!
But of course, you have less attack options. All of this is extremely messy and hard to remember, and since the N64 version is really fast-paced regardless of the mode you're in, you often find yourself not having the attack you want when you want. By the time you transform into the mode that does have that attack, it's already too late. While I use Button Basher as a term of endearment, it's really an accurate descriptor for Transmetals. You keep mashing shit until you find a good long-range attack, and spam it until you win the round, and you have enough footage for your YouTube video. So suffice to say, this plays terribly. You know what would have been better? Bloody Roar! Just imagine a solid 3D fighter with Beast Wars characters where when you're powered up, you can transform into Beast Mode. Like, I'm giving you gold here! In contrast to the mess that is this N64 version, the PlayStation iteration is much slower, more deliberate, and therefore a good deal better. Vehicle mode is actually more of a dash while you're in beast mode, which is easier to remember, and you do have a better selection of distinct melee attacks, which can then also lead to some limited juggle opportunities. You also have a super attack that changes depending on whether you're a beast or a robot, and hell, you can even combo into these, and some of them are actually pretty hype. After playing a few matches, you start to realize that this is just a bad Power Stone, which, while not a glowing recommendation at first, I'd still rather play a bad Power Stone over whatever the other version is trying to be. It's as simple as that. In terms of modes and extras, well, over on the
Nintendo Ultra 64.
there's a selection of bizarre multiplayer mini-games. For some reason, there's a weird race where you have to mash buttons, a coin collecting thing, and a Samurai Kirby ripoff. Yeah, I assume these were included to ape off of Mario Party's success, but your guess is as good as mine. There's also a super deformed or kids option if you want to enjoy that, and the N64 lacks a training mode, although I don't think it really needs it. But thankfully, it is included over on the PlayStation. And finally, both have a decent selection of supplemental materials. You can look at renders of the roster, toys, CGI clips, among a few other things. It's actually kind of neat. So yeah, a very mixed bag here, which is something that's going to continue over in the... I already touched upon this, but the N64 version is fast to the point that it's a detriment to the game, as you barely feel like you have any control over your transformer. When you're in vehicle mode, it's more akin to a racing game than anything else, which I guess is that penny racer's acumen. But regardless, every character in every mode feels pretty squirrely. And as far as I know, not one protoform ever scanned a squirrel during the show's run, so explain that to me! The PlayStation Beast Wars, however, is a lot more calm, relaxed, and just feels better to play. Moving around your Maximal and or Predacon has the appropriate weight and heft you'd expect, and I mean, yeah, it's still pretty janky, but it's the type of jank you can get used to. Honestly, neither has the worst game feel I've ever felt, but they're also obviously far from the best, so where exactly does that leave us? Okay, actually, it's pretty evident where that leaves us. The PlayStation version, which, while basic and could have been a lot better, is barely worth reviewing on this show, so I think that safely tucks it away in the cozy corner of our tier list known as That'll Be Just Fine. Meanwhile, my childhood memories of the N64 version have betrayed me, because while the nonsensical controls and ugly graphics are indeed quite rough, Transmetals is also so chaotic and stupid that it's at least good for a hearty laugh. I think at the time of release it boiled my piss so much because I was a fan of the show, but in 2023 it's so ridiculous and plays so poorly that I actually take pity on it. So much so that I'm going to be placing it in the close but not quite tier. But for those out there that are still curious about it, absolutely do not spend money on this cart if your intention is to play and enjoy it, cause you won't. But hell, feel free to emulate it, cause it's that unhinged. So yeah, I was expecting something maybe approaching the worst, but it's merely just bad. So add another one to your body count, expect no mercy, as you are safe for another day. And if you out there want to push other hapless victims into our ring, do let me know in the comments below or sound the battle gong over on my Twitter. Until then, warriors, roll out or maximize or whatever, and I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game. Welcome, warriors, once again to the worst fighting game, the endless kumite, where I pit the dregs of the button-bashing genre against our current reigning champion. Expect no. No, don't you do it. Don't. Okay. Expect no mercy. All right. Good. Cool. Anyway, this week,
I have seen the amateur and it is you.
last time, we tried throwing a tag team consisting of both the PlayStation and N64 at our champ, and yeah, it really didn't work out. So, if we're gonna have any hope of dethroning a painfully programmed piece of PC piffle, well, we'll just have to fight fire with fire. Enter Xenophage, Alien Bloodsport, a 1995 stinker that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. The question is, though, with its ugly as sin characters, insane gameplay, and poor reputation be enough to topple our presiding king of the crap? Well, we won't know for sure until we get it in the ring! Any old school PC gamer worth their salt knows the name Apogee. I mean, in the early to mid 90s, whenever this logo booted up, you knew you were gonna be in for a good time. Commander Keen, Duke Nukem, Crystal Caves, Monster Bash, Raptor, Call of the Shadows, Wolfenstein 3D, you may have heard of that one, the list goes on and on. While they collaborated with talented development teams like id Software, Terminal Reality, and Remedy, they sometimes published the games of lesser-known outfits, which in this case was Argo Games. They were a shareware company consisting of like 2 to 3 full-time employees and really didn't have a whole lot to show for themselves, unless some of you out there remember the unmemorable Night Raid. Apogee wanted to get into the button-bashing business, which by 1994 had penetrated deep into the PC marketplace, with notable releases like Body Blows, One Must Fall, and a variety of solid ports. With all their other partners busy with other projects and Apogee themselves very occupied developing the third Duke Nukem, they reached out to Argo to put a fighting game together, and what you're currently seeing is the result. It did not review or sell very well. It is considered a bit of a black eye in Apogee and later 3D Realms' back catalog, especially when you compare it to all their other bangers. Funnily enough, 3D Realms made the game freeware back in 2006, which along with the game also contained a text file with some very choice and wise words from Xenophage's original programmer, Jason Blokowiak. We at Argo Games hadn't done a fighting game before, and neither had the folks at Apogee. We at Argo hadn't dealt with the ups and downs of outsourcing art content and learning how to manage that, including understanding when and if to pull everything in-house, is an art unto itself. All of that was a drain on the game and gameplay, but youthful optimism made us believe that we could kind of blunder our way through to a successful result by way of abundant effort. Now, reflecting back across all these years and all the projects I've been involved with then and since, I really believe that reasoned, rational project management is the cure for what has and continues to ail the games industry. Larger scope projects have amplified some of the issues that have been lurking for quite some time now. Know your strengths, know your limitations. Capitalize on your strengths, minimize the effect of your weaknesses. Be bold in your attempts, but understand your risk/reward choices. Wow, that's actually incredible insight. And who says you can't learn things watching the worst fighting game? You know, aside from most people. 2D PC games in the early to mid-90s looked a bit different from what you saw on console, due to the power of the mighty VGA display standard. The way things scrolled, the speed, there was a lot of variation between the hundreds of different games and the various PC configurations they would need to run on. And as we can see, Xenophage had a distinct visual style. Things kick off with a bizarre little intro that starts with default male 02 chopping wood in front of his lovely cabin before an evil face in a TV tells him he's now competing in a fighting tournament to the death with various extraterrestrial beings. And if he loses, the entire human race will be denied the right to procreate. Damn, a lot of pressure on your shoulders there, buddy. Don't choke. The other contestants are also fighting for the continued existence of their own race, including this random salary woman, who I assume is also from Earth? Oh, why does our shithole of a planet get 2 chances, but nobody else does? That's unfair. Boo! Listen, this intro is definitely lacking a little in the production department. It's stilted, awkward, and default male O2's line reading here is room-esque levels of delivery. Menus are fairly bland and basic, but they at least lean into the futuristic sci-fi vibe the game is going for. When you actually start playing it though, there's obviously a lot to take in. It goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Why the hell are there sprites this goddamn big? Don't get me wrong, it's technically impressive, but they take up so much screen real estate, it's hard to react to things and attack accordingly. There's also going to be plenty you'll have to react to. All of these freakish fighters have a bizarre repertoire of moves and powers. We have a toad, worm, squid, mouth, bat, spike, and then the 2 lame humans, Nick and Selena. Then there's also the 3 bosses, Parasite, the Champion, and the Grand Champion. How did they decide that? Now, all of these names are, you know, devoid of any creativity, and as you can see, the characters they represent look even worse. While the game is extremely colorful and vibrant, and a few members of the roster like Spike or Bat look like something out of Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials, which is neat, there's some others that I have to take some time out to specifically shit on. First up, Worm, who, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing you are. He is just 4 blue fleshlights duct taped together, and that's it. The 2 humans are so stock and boring that my eyes just glaze over whenever they're on screen. And then there's Squid, who looks like if Patrick Starfish melted in the sun and then put on a colonial pilgrim outfit. Him or they or whatever just might be one of the worst characters I've ever seen in a fighting game, or hell, a video game in general. I guess to be in line with the size of the characters, the backgrounds are similarly massive, but the way they scroll along with the action is so visually distracting. It's like mini screen tearing crisscrossing over everything. What's just as bad is that a lot of the stages feel like illustrated backdrops with no real sense of weight or actually being there. Now, I will point out that the stupid evil face on the wall said that this was all happening in front of holographic projections of each fighter's homeworld, but I'm choosing to ignore that in my complaint. I mean, any random episode of TNG that featured the holodeck looked better than this. It also doesn't help that each fighter's shadow casts backwards and across each stage, like they're performing in front of a literal painted wall instead of being placed on the floor, like in literally every other fighting game ever made since the dawn of time. Moving on from the visuals, because I really want to, we have the music. Now, this is a curious case because the soundtrack is composed by Apogee regular Bobby Prince, who is chiefly responsible for what you hear in Commander Keen, Blake Stone. Look, the guy's a legend, but this certainly isn't his best work. It just lacks a certain oomph or tempo, and honestly really doesn't match the game's style or theme, in my opinion. I, of course, can't move on from this section without letting you know if Xenophage contains endings for each character, the most fundamental building block to any fighting game experience. And it does. Now, they are all mostly a brief paragraph voiced by the announcer and a quick 2-second animated snippet, so while it is the bare minimum, it is nice to have. You know what about Xenophage is not nice to have? So as I stated earlier, the camera is too damn close to the screen, and the sprites are such big, huge bastards that it makes the game hard to play, and everyone hates it, right? Well, Xenophage does have a way to mitigate this, which is buried in the options screen, and it actually does help the gameplay feel a bit, I I don't know, normal? By turning off the camera zoom, you get a static view of the action, which lets you recognize incoming attacks better, which then leads to some semblance of sanity. Even with this positive, robust change, as we can see, the sprites are now maybe a bit too small? Could they not have figured out a happy medium here? Gameplay and mechanics are pretty basic, but they're functional enough. There's a 4-button setup split between weak and strong attacks. Every weirdo has a few special moves that are mostly done via MK-style button taps or traditional command motions, and you can even perform some pretty decent combos complete with a scoring system. Hell, there's even special moves which act as combo finishers, so there's a sprinkling of KI in there to boot. It's the mid-90s, and you know what that means. There's also some options to finish him. Once your opponent is near death and the screen starts to flash red, that's your cue to input a command which will result in your character's move. Yeah, that's what you're calling it? Meat? Oh, okay, you do you. You can then add insult to injury by inputting a second command which will trigger a flambe move, which fries your alien foe to a nice crisp. None of these fatals are super unique or memorable, but they work, and the sheer amount of pixelated blood flying through the air is fairly satisfying. For all its faults, Xenophage is indeed a very squishy game. The only other thing of note in terms of mechanics is the resurrection move. Once you've been defeated, if you start churning butter on your movement controls in a clockwise direction, it shocks your character back to life with a bit more health. Again, very similar to KI. You can actually do this as many times as you want in a given match as long as you're quick enough. You can also turn this feature off, which is a very good thing. Gonna be honest, while Xenophage doesn't make a good first impression, there's nothing super egregious or really dumb about the systems in place, with their biggest fault being that they're all pretty milquetoast, with nothing really setting them apart. It's the available modes, though, that are a bit more interesting. There's a training option, which is appreciated, but it's useless, because it features one of these fucking clown balloons you punched at parties when you were 6. This dummy can't be turned off or replaced with any members of the roster, and this is an issue because the dummy always hits you back with a nigh invincible counter hit, which leads to a hard knockdown. He's in my head! So fuck the training, and let's talk about the free play option. This is essentially versus mode, but it's actually a good deal more than that, as it lets you customize a bunch of match options like turning off specials or throws, auto blocking, and even letting you fiddle with stats. You can also fight against the CPU and assign them as any member of the cast, even the bosses, if you unlock them with a code. Speaking of codes, there's actually quite a few. You can mess with the gravity of the jumps, increase the blood even further beyond the normal threshold, and make it stain the ground, an option which I assume blew up many a rig in 1995. Finally, there's the big purple elephant, or rather thunder lizard, in the room. If you input a code, you can fight tooth and claw against Blarney, a biting satire on a friendly dinosaur's exploding popularity / infamy in the mid-90s. Yeah, timeless stuff here. So even though Argo games were obviously under duress during this tight deadline and needed to outsource art and models to another studio, they were still able to squeeze a few good modes and extras in there, so that part wound up pretty solid, which is more than what I can say about the... Moving characters around in Xenophage is not good. Everything has this slippery, haphazard feel to it, and if it wasn't obvious from all the footage, the jumping is all fucked up. Regardless if they're a weird 4-legged frog thing or a lady in a dress, everyone can leap like 80 feet in the air, and in an instant, making it really hard to react to, and it's just absolute bollocks. Jumping is such a fundamental thing to a fighter, and to get it wrong, combined with wonky horizontal movement, well, it brings Xenophage down several notches. Special moves are much the same, as each character has at least one insane technique that's so fast or busted or weird, it only furthers the problem, and That's all I got to say about that. If you now like me to identify the two main problems that plague this alien blood sport, they are absolutely the way the game controls and absolutely the characters you control, which is a shame because this has a cool name, a decent concept, colorful graphics, the Apogee backing, but does it have the moist stink, the gushy mush needed to dethrone EXPECT NO MERCY? Let's find out. No, it doesn't. While Xenophage's controls and feel are its worst feature, followed quickly by Squid's everything, you can definitely tell that some work at least went into this project. The detailed backgrounds, the combos, the wealth of options and secrets. Argo wanted to make a good fighting game here, they just didn't have the experience or the time to truly deliver on that. So, I can't in good conscience place this much higher than the, the ever-popular fairly stinky tier, where only the coolest fighting games come for chill, relaxing vibes. So, despite their best efforts, the galactic clowns of Xenophage, and I'm not even referencing this guy here, couldn't quite take down the Dollar Tree martial artists of EXPECT NO MERCY, so it will continue clutching its crap-encrusted crown for another day. And if you know of any other button bashers deserving enough to have a go in our ring, do let me know in the comments below or sound the battle gong over on my Twitter. So until then, Warriors, I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game.
Come on! Are you ready to party? Gentlemen, don't be far behind. Let's party!
Welcome back, Warriors, to another episode of The Worst Fighting Game, my endless campaign of combat where I seek to dethrone the current king of the crap, which shall remain nameless.
I have seen the amateur.
No! Okay, well, yes, EXPECT NO MERCY is currently on a 6-match winning streak, but truth be told, I think I've been going about this the wrong way. If I'm seeking to find something that's worse, it shouldn't be the same familiar digitized dreck, but instead something that's both unexpected and unhinged. And really, in the realm of fighting games, few things are as unhinged as the slapstick button basher that was always more concerned with making fart jokes over compelling mechanics. This is no better exemplified than with 1998's ClayFighter 63 1/3, the cleverly titled second sequel in the series, which while having a fair bit of hype leading into its launch, splattered onto store shelves with a wet thud, along with an absolutely frosty critical reception. Will this wacky assortment of snowmen, blobs, and racial stereotypes be enough to Claytality EXPECT NO MERCY? Well, we won't know for sure until we get it in the ring. First announced in 1995 for the Panasonic M2, ClayFighter Battle for Claymoto Island, ClayFighter Extreme was almost immediately cancelled and then brought over to the end. You know what? I already covered all this shit in my dedicated What Happened episode on ClayFighter, so go check that out, starting at 7:55 to get the skinny as to how Bad Mr. Frosty, Taffy, and the rest bumbled their way onto the 5th generation of console hardware. Are you done watching yet? Because I'm not recapping it. I'm seriously not. I'm just jumping ahead. Wait, what? You think I won't do that? ClayFighter 63 1/3 splorched onto the N64 October 21st, 1998 in North America and November 1st in Europe. And sadly, Japan never got this magnum opus, which is a shame, because I'd love to see Tokido and Kakeru have a 1st to 10 in this one. Regardless, most magazines and websites were happy to slap ClayFighter with 2s and 3s, with the very few positive impressions coming from both Nintendo Power, oh my god, I'm so shocked, and Game Fan magazine for some reason. They praised the humor and the accessible gameplay, while many others criticized the tiny amount of fighters, blurry sprites, choppy animation, and very few game modes. which, spoilers, is all stuff I'm gonna criticize too. I have to recognize, however, that 63 1/3 does have a cult following because it's just so over the top and has that so bad that it's good style energy that has drawn people into its soggy, clayey aura. And well, that about recaps the history portion of this video. See, I told you it's gonna be short. I wasn't fucking around, but with that out of the way, it's the perfect time to move on to the... So, I can tell you this for free. ClayFighter 63 1/3 is an ugly, ugly game. I mean, just look at it.
Look at it! It's ugly, isn't it? You look at it!
While the ClayFighter team at Interplay went back to using the same stop-motion animation studio that worked on the first entry and not the second, it produced really mixed results here. The N64 was not built with this type of thing in mind, so 2D animation data was a rare commodity, and I honestly think this animates worse than the first two games. The clay models themselves do look pretty awesome, with a crazier, more macabre vibe to many of the returning ClayFighters, but when you combine that with the dark, simplistic 3D backgrounds, you get this sleazy, blurry, smeary sort of visual identity that to me is way less appealing than the saturated, cartoony look the series once had. I get how it was the team's first attempt at 3D here, but oftentimes you can't even tell what you're looking at, as these textures, even by N64 standards, look rougher than a badger's ass. Following that, the menus and UI are also a very no-frills affair, with this blasé design that, I don't know, just doesn't play into the wacky world all that well. Fortunately, ClayFighter does excel in one area of the presentation, and that's the audio, or the sound effects more accurately. Gonna be honest, the only thing I have to say about the game's music has started and concluded with this very sentence. I was just playing the game right before starting this script, and I legitimately don't remember anything about the soundtrack. However, the splats, punchy hit impacts, explosions, and of course the farts are all of the high fidelity you'd come to expect. Interplay shelling out for Michael Buffer as the ring announcer does a lot to add to the proceedings as well.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Let's get ready to crumble!
As he gives his full gusto to all the KI-esque combo callouts.
That was brilliant! Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!
Little girly combo!
Oh, that's gonna leave a mark!
But really, it's the accomplished troupe of voice actors that does the heavy lifting for not just the presentation, but for the entire game. Dan Castellaneta reprising his role as
Earthworm Jim!
as well as Frank Welker and Rob Paulson as a whole bunch of others.
the ClayFighters are also literally unable to shut up during a fight, throwing out all kinds of one-liners with at least one or two eliciting a smile at worst or a sensible chuckle at best. Except of course for Kung Pao Enter the Fist here. Even back in the 90s, I remember first seeing / hearing this guy and thinking, oh man, that's not cool. And speaking of the 90s, if you bought or rented this back in the day and didn't bother to look at the instruction manual, you'd have no idea what the hell was going on. There's this weird, ugly 3D island, a bunch of new characters, and that's it. There's nothing, not even a quick text crawl that explains the story, and when you actually do earn a character's ending, yes, endings confirmed, you'd have likely been even more confused. What's worse is that the endings are, let's be honest, pretty shitty. Your character just flails around on the left there with text slowly scrolling on the right, and yeah, that's it. Overall, it's a pretty uneven presentation. I think if the backgrounds had been kept 2D and they released this on hardware with more storage space like the PlayStation or Saturn or hell, the Dreamcast the following year, we could have gotten something that didn't look like, well, this. Oh, but my little Clayites, we've only just begun, because now it's time to break down the... I usually fold what modes are available in this section as well, and that's what I'm gonna do here. There are no modes. I mean, there's options and then simply begin game, which brings you directly to the arcade mode, and if a second player presses start here, the verses will kick in, I think. But yeah, that's the modes. ClayFighter 63 1/3, Killer Instinct, which you try to ape really hard here, had a full-fledged training mode, tournament, and team options back in 1996, so what's the excuse to not include at least one of those? What's more is that there's actual shit in 63 1/3, like combos, supers, parries, so it's even more egregious there's no way to properly lab any of it. You know, for the two people in the world that would lab this. It's just really shocking that a fighting game released in 1998, late 1998 mind you, literally has one mode in which to fight. I mean, hell, even Judgment Clay at least had a tournament option. As the reviews lamented, the base roster is also pretty limited, with Bad Mr. Frosty, Taffy, Ichabod Clay, Blob, T-Hoppy, and Bonker all returning from the previous games. In terms of new blood, or Clay, 63 1/3 adds Hungun, Kung Pao, Jim, and 3 unlockables, Sumo Santa, Boogerman, and Dr. Kiln. Now, I get locking Kiln, he was mentioned in the last game and acts as the boss here, but why the other two? Like, why would you hide the king of the boogers? Having a base roster of 9, which was only one more than Street Fighter 2, was pretty stingy in 98, and I'm sure it didn't make for a good first impression whenever anybody booted this up. What actually does make for a good first impression, though, shockingly, is the gameplay. Sorta. Moves are done with both taps and motions, and within seconds you start discovering super moves, which come in the form of big auto combos, projectiles, anti-airs, all types of stuff. You also build meter incredibly fast in 63 1/3, maybe even too fast, as matches soon devolve into a flurry of supers hitting and or whiffing. The combo system, which is modeled very, very closely on Killer Instinct, is also pretty forgiving. Things that shouldn't work, do. Moves that shouldn't hit, hit. It's actually kind of fun. This is due in part to the fact that every time a super is triggered, there's always this slow-mo moment and accompanying sound effect, which can lead to some pretty hype moments.
Dumb combo! Weak combo.
There's also Claytalities, but they're all pretty lame. Insane combos, which are essentially ultras, combo breakers, and even parrying, which is done exactly like Street Fighter 3 by tapping forward on any hit impact. It's nice these things are in there, but they don't really gel together to make any sort of cohesive feeling fighting system, because it all boils down to using as many supers as you can to wipe out your opponent, as it's the quickest way to victory. This is because everyone has too much damn health. You can confirm like 3 supers in a row and it'll barely bring your opponent down to 50%, and there's no way to change that, by the way, not even in the options. You can thankfully turn off breakthroughs or stage transitions because, well, these awkward animations where your opponent slowly slides towards a door and the screen fades out and then back into a different level only serves to disrupt the flow of the match. While this type of thing was in a few 2D games before this, I think this marks the first time it was implemented in a 3D fighter, predating DOA 2 by a good year. Although, I think DOA pulled them off a little better. So, with all that said, here's the thing. It's actually fairly fun to go around the roster and chain into everyone's super bullshit. The problem comes with the fact that's all 63 1/3 has to offer. The gameplay doesn't get more complicated or nuanced than that, but then again, I'm not sure what I should be expecting out of fucking ClayFighter of all things. The team that created this series was always more concerned with poking fun at the genre rather than pushing it forward, so I can't be all that mad over this. What I can get mad over, however, is the... Much like soggy clay itself, 63 1/3 is pretty sluggish all around, which is a direct result of the choppy animation, slowdown due to all the spillets which spew out of every character's every orifice, and the game just not being very well optimized. It's not dreadful, mind you, and I've played a lot worse in this regard, but it doesn't do the game any favors, even when it desperately needs some. If there were speed settings, like the previous ClayFighters had, it probably would have helped relieve the plodding pace. There's certainly something to salvage here though, as 63 1/3 feels really close to being okay, but just misses that mark. I know I mentioned this before, but I still can't help but wonder how this might have worked on the Saturn or Dreamcast, or if the entire game was done on the N64, but with 3D models. But on second thought, that would defeat the purpose of, clay fighting, so I digress. Anyway, the game feel ain't great. We should move on, but before we do, there's one last piece of business I need to mention. The Sculptor's Cut! This blockbuster exclusive special edition adds in characters that were left out of the first version, including Lockjaw Pooch, the Zappa Yow Yow Boys, High Five, and Lady Liberty. R.I.P. to Hobocop. To save space so they could squeeze these last ClayFighters in, Interplay went through the main cast and reduced their overall animation frame count even further. Some special moves and claytalities were also deleted, but the worst of all was the complete removal of the insane combos, a mechanic literally meant to parody KI, which was kind of their whole brand. The crazy combo system was also replaced with something far more basic and stripped down, and I don't know, it just immediately feels less fun, so you might as well just ignore this cartoonish new intro that promises more fun, cause it's just lying to you.
ClayFighter!
1-to-1 they set the stage!
ClayFighter!
Pounding clay is all the rage!
That may have been all to the tale, but Dr. Kiln planned to prevail and re-release the meteor's goo and set more fighters on the loose.
The select screen is nicer, I guess, and each character's end boss is now their rival instead of always Dr. Kiln, but yeah, overall, despite the added fighters, I think this is the inferior version, but you might disagree. If you're a physical fiend though, it is also the most rare and expensive version, like, by a lot. It's estimated that only 15 to 20,000 copies of Sculptor's Cut were ever manufactured, so if you want a complete version in box, expect to spend a cool $3,000, or $300 for just the cart. Jesus, I mean, who pays $300 for a bad fighting game?
It's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me.
Whew, okay, so with all the clay out on the table, where does 63 1/3 and fuck it, Sculptor's Cut land on our tier list of terribleness? It's strong in terms of presentation with its sound effects and voice acting, but not so much graphics. And while the gameplay becomes simplistic, it is fun for a spell. But the paltry selection of modes, sluggish feel, and limited roster can't be ignored either. While they're almost identical in a lot of ways, I am going to score both versions separately, and 63 1/3 is really straddling the line here, with Boogerman's toxic gases almost pushing it into the always overstuffed, fairly stinky tier. But I think its wacky gameplay and combo system barely keep it out of there. So, I declare that all 63 1/3 bits of ClayFighter are just fine. And as much as I love Tress McNeil as Lady Liberty, I think Sculptor's Cut is a tiny step back when it comes to gameplay, so yeah, you sit there with all the other losers in this stink club, and you think about what you did. I can totally see why both these games were rated harshly on consoles back in the day though. Franchises like Tekken and Virtua Fighter were highly lauded by the press, so switching over to something like ClayFighter, whose main draw was always fighting games are kinda dumb, was wearing pretty thin by the third time around. Still though, going back to it for this review, I was expecting something far worse, and was surprised it didn't age nearly as bad as I had assumed it would. Well, yeah, except for that part. So, expect no mercy, I was wrong. These Claytastic warriors didn't have the gooey guts to dethrone ya, so your legacy lives on for another day.
I have seen the amateur, and it is you!
Yeah. And if you out there would like to nominate any other future contenders to take on our reigning champion, let me know in the comments below or on any of the socials that you see now on your screen. And until then, warriors, I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game. Welcome back, warriors, to another bone-crunching episode of The Worst Fighting Game, the show whose #1 rule is to not talk about doing an obvious Fight Club reference. I just kind of did one there anyway, didn't I? Anyway, last time, all 63 1/3 members of the ClayFighters tried and failed to knock our reigning champ, Expect No Mercy, from atop of its lonely throne of stinky bones. Now, when I go back and review all the previous contenders and pretenders we've had so far, one thing struck out at me. They're all old as hell, as we've yet to even break into the 6th generation of consoles. While Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Soul Calibur, and a few others became the standard bearers during these dark times, weirder, crappier button bashers were becoming few and far between. But we're gonna rectify that today with one of the crappiest offerings from said era, 2004's Fight Club. I remember this thing being reviled by pretty much everyone with a pulse back in the day, as it got some extremely savage reviews. But were they savage enough to topple Expect No Mercy today? Well, we won't know for sure until we get it in the ring. Fight Club's publisher, Sierra, or more accurately, Vivendi Universal, put out a lot of product in the 2000s, with some of it being all original IP, while most of it was based on various media properties. But for every Hulk Ultimate Destruction and Scarface, there was a Fight Club or Lawnmower Racing Mania. The former, for example, was developed by a new startup called Genuine Games, which was composed of former staffers from both Insomniac and EA. I can't imagine that they imagined their first major project in the booming billion-dollar gaming industry would be a fighting game based on a 5-year-old movie that was about toxic masculinity and carried a strong anti-establishment, anti-capitalist message, but here we are. Anyway, there's not much else to the development history of Fight Club. As I said, Vivendi Universal hired a lot of studios to put out a lot of licensed video games, and I'm assuming that was the case here. Tight deadline, minimal budget, zero marketing, etc. The one interesting factoid about this game, and I'm sure most of you know where I'm going with this, is the inclusion of the red-capped wonder, Mr. Fred Durst. As some may know, Freddie D is a big fan of Fight Club. In fact, he's seen it about 28 times! But he's also a fan of the movie's director, the legendary David Fincher. Fincher actually gave Fred some crash courses in the art of cinematic direction back in the day, and you can see the fruits of that labor in modern masterpieces like The Fanatic.
You okay with some music? You like a little Limp Biscuit? Sure. You like a little biscuit? Yeah.
The real reason Fred is in this, though, is because it was a clause/demand whenever a game publisher wanted to use Limp Bizkit's music. Hey man, you want our track? Then I gotta be playable in your game. Bottom line, bro. Wow, what a businessman. So yeah, now that we're all up to speed on this issue, where exactly does the LIMP biscuit appear in the game? Well, it's mostly found in the... Once you boot this sucker up, right off the bat you are assaulted with a PS2 as fuck intro that's filled with quick cuts, lots of action, and the dulcet tones of Head for the Barricade, one of Limp Bizkit's better songs off Results May Vary, which is factually their worst album that everyone's still a bit too harsh on.
I just think it's neat.
This intro is actually kind of intriguing for a reason I'll get to later, but for now, allow me to present to you the moist, rainy main menu of Fight Club, which should look familiar if you owned a PS2 during this era and had even a passing interest in fighting games. This is because it looks exactly like the menus in Final Fight Streetwise, Def Jam, Urban Reign, Beatdown, Street Fist, The Punchback, you know, all of the 2000s. Everything is desaturated to hell, there's this low energy beat that's barely audible, things just look kinda depressing, and this is all to prep you for the bad times that await. First up, the character select screen. You have these ID cards here, which are kind of cute, but you don't get a full view of any of the quote-unquote characters. Those are very loose quotes, by the way. These are real-time 3D models, and you're allowed to select their secondary costume on the screen, but you can't see them because it's just their headshots, so it's kind of useless, and that's a good start. Alright, so there's Jack, Tyler, Officer Stern, and Bob, and then like some of the tertiary characters that I think are from the film or the book. The Mechanic, Lou, and Raymond, were they even in the literal Fight Club? Or were they that desperate to fill out the roster? If so, that's a pretty good reason not to make a fighting game based on Fight Club. What's more is that 99% of the time, it's the characters that make up the memorable core of any good fighter, and if you lack that, even a little bit, fans will let you know. Just ask this guy right here. It's the unique personalities and wild movesets that draw you in and make you want to experiment with the whole cast. But that's not the case here. Raymond, Angelface, Lou, and the others that I'm not even going to acknowledge are the furthest thing from beautiful, unique snowflakes. I realize genuine games couldn't do much in terms of character design because, you know, this is based on Fight Club, but it doesn't help that the models look pretty rough by 2004 standards as well. Even Freddie D is lacking in the charisma department as he doesn't even have any voice clips. In fact, I don't think any of them do. When you win a match and your character does a victory taunt, their lips move, but they're silent as the grave. Man, that's awkward. I would chalk this up to a bug, but I don't think it is. I just think they forgot to record the lines. Environments are dark and dingy, but again, this is a Fight Club video game, so I can't fault them for understanding the assignment. There are some fancy graphical touches though, like some super intense spotlights, a shitload of rain, and even blood that splashes onto the screen, which, while technically impressive, does tend to make things hard to see here and there, a great feature for any fighting game. The UI is also kind of bland, I mean, just look at it, but funnily enough, pre-release beta screenshots look a fair bit more dynamic. And Jesus, check out this officially released bullshot from back in the day. The game does not look like that.
Everything is lies! Everything is lies!
The soundtrack, as mentioned, does have some biscuity goodness, along with Korn, Queens of the Stone Age, and the Dust Brothers, so at least it gets some points there. And finally, I know you've all been waiting for it, but yes, there are endings for each character via the arcade mode, and they're about what you'd expect. Or slightly worse. Once you've defeated Nedward Eorton over here, you're treated to a very brief 15-second CGI clip that just cuts off at the end, where it seems like your character is going to keep talking or there be, you know, some type of punchline, but no, it just hard cuts to black.
I went back to school because I was afraid of Tyler. I remembered why I wanted to go in the first place. I came back to thank him for showing me how to live every day as if it were my last.
And that's pretty much it for the ending. So, oh, wait, there's a far more elaborate one in the cinematic NetherRealm style story campaign, which we'll dig into a little bit later. Wait, why don't I just dig into it right now? So yeah, Fight Club's presentation fails to impress in a lot of areas, but it still might edge out the game's mechanics. Allow me to explain. Despite there being a decent amount of fighters, 10 from the start and 4 unlockable, there really isn't 14 in total. There's 3. Allow me to explain. When you start to create a fighter mode that's called the Member Services, you have the choice of 3 fighting styles: martial arts, brawler, grappler, and yeah, that's your 3 characters. These styles are divvied out amongst the roster. Slim guys are martial artists, average dudes are brawlers, and husky boys like myself are the grapplers. And unlike something awesome like Def Jam Fight for New York, there's no variation amongst these styles, no unique animations or special moves. These are 3 static movesets, and everyone has to share. Tyler and Angel Face, for example, have the exact same throws, the exact same combos, the exact same everything. I think they have the same face? You can't imagine how boring this makes everything. Yeah, each style has about the same punches, kicks, and combos as an average Tekken character, but there's no flash to any of it, as it's just the same stuff you'd see in a low-budget MMA game. So you're gonna experience the same thing over and over and over again. It's just grating on the soul. Now, to be fair, Fight Club's gameplay does have a few nuances, but they make very little difference to the proceedings. If your health bar is low, this little alert symbol pops up, which means you're susceptible to a major injury, which comes in the form of a quick X-ray shot that will show your bones breaking, usually via a throw. In theory, this should disable your arm or leg in the next round, but no, they screwed that up too. Fight Club doesn't work on a best 2 out of 3 round system, there's just the one, so breaking your opponent's arm in arcade or versus doesn't have any repercussions. Those only come in if you create a boring man and enter the survival mode. Here, you have to beat a bunch of fighters in a row on 1 life bar, and it's also here where you can sustain lasting injuries. If your arm gets broken, it'll be disabled in the next match, and you'll have to go to Member Services and spend some XP to get it patched up. Again, this only affects your caw or your calf, so it might as well not exist. None of this stuff is applicable to Tyler, Jack, and the rest. Related to this mechanic, you or your opponent can choose to tap out early from the match by pressing 2 buttons together, which essentially saves you from having your leg or butt bone broken. Butt bone broken, I can barely say that. Again though, there's no real point to doing this in most of the available modes. Now, what do you get if you beat 9 guys in survival mode? Well, you unlock someone named Richard Chesler, who, wait, Jack's boss? He's not in the Fight Club! And I think with that, I've broken down everything in regards to the gameplay. It's a bog standard 3D affair that honestly feels like you're playing a simple 2000 or wait, remember 8 minutes ago when I said, this intro is actually kind of intriguing for a reason I'll get to later. Well, it's now later. Said intro clearly shows in-game cinematics where you and your opponent go busting through a stage element, like a window, a fence, or a door, but fuck me, I can't find a way to do any of these. Nowhere in the game is this mechanic explained, not in the training mode and not in the move list, so, you know, let's look elsewhere. Okay, so there's no FAQs. Oh wait, well, there's this one, but the dude never finished it. Okay. Okay, the game's actual instruction manual doesn't list them. And finally, let's check. yeah, they're not on YouTube either. Hell, I even checked out other people's random arcade playthroughs because I just assumed I was crazy by this point, but yeah, zero, zilch, nada. If one of your mechanics is this hidden and this vague, and there's zero explanation on how it works, even in the manual, well, you fucked up. Moving on, I do have to give credit for Fight Club's collection of modes. There's arcade, versus, survival, training, baby's first creative fighter, and even an online option. Obviously, that last one is useless to us in 2023, but hey, they made the effort. There's also the cinematic story campaign, where you play as a nameless protagonist that's trying to track down Tyler Durden. Honestly, aside from the CGI ending, which actually tries to tie this game's events into the movie in a crazy way, this is a painfully dull and awkward experience. Why? Well, here's a 100% unedited clip from one of the cutscenes.
Irvin told me to come. I'm looking for Tyler Durden. Check inside.
Fuck off, pretty boy.
Even if I did know where he was, I couldn't tell you.
Then give him this message for me. Fuck you.
I can remember that.
And fuck you too, pretty boy.
What are you looking at? I'm looking for Tyler Durden. I want to join the club. Yeah? Fuck off. We're not taking applications from losers. Beat it.
I swear I didn't fuck with that. But yeah, the mechanics of Fight Club are either horseshit, pointless, or non-existent, but it has more modes than almost every other game I've played on this show, so I guess it balances out? I think it's maybe a bit too early to make that judgment call until I start talking about the... This is shockingly one of the game's better points. Yeah, a good number of the animations are stiff and the speed of them is all over the place, but the controls and general feel of Fight Club are perfectly serviceable. You can run, go into dash attack, circle around your opponent, and it's all fairly responsive. There's also a decent sense of impact when said attacks connect. I mean, it's still several steps down from Tekken and Virtua Fighter, so for a better comparison, it's more akin to like Tao Feng Fist of the Lotus. Take that for what you will. So there's nothing too egregious here, but honestly, I'm more pissed that all video long, this game has tried to woo me with fluffy window dressing. Oh, Limp Bizkit songs, huh? Having the King of Nookie be playable too. Oh, there's also a bonus skeleton skin you can access with a password? How dare you try to rizz me up, Fight Club? I see through your thin veneer of edgy 2000s charm. This is one of the few times where it's a combination of the roster, yeah, you know, these human dynamos of excitement, and the core gameplay being the biggest offenders in a worst fighting game episode. Cause truth be told, everything else about Fight Club is fine. Like I said, it controls and feels okay, there's a ton of modes, and it does have a kind of goofy charm about it. It's just so boring to actually play, as every match is identical to the last. Whittle down their health with 1 to 2 combos, do a throw, rinse and repeat, with a homemade bar of soap, of course. So where does that put us? Well, honestly, I think Tyler, Bob, and Jack's rapidly declining sense of self-worth are destined for the ever-exclusive close but not quite tier. Oh, and also, I'm gonna hit this box art in there as hard as I can! And with that, another episode of my pointless crusade to find something worse than Expect No Mercy has ended, 1 minute at a time. I guess I just felt like destroying something beautiful, which is a reminder, of course, that we need to sometimes lose everything for us to be free to do anything. We're the same all singing, all dancing crap of the world, and I am done with all the Fight Club quotes. If you know of any other contenders you think could take on the king of amateurs, do let me know in the comments below or hit me up on any of the socials you see on your screen. Until then, warriors, I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game.
It's time for you to get into the character. You hit a loser, hit a win, I'm only asking you. Either you beat him or you beat him like an amateur. Either you drive or you get driven like a passenger.
Welcome back, Warriors, to the Worst Fighting Game, the show where I try to find the worst fighting. You know how this works. I played Criticom, and it was really, really bad, and later on I played Expect No Mercy, which was even worse somehow. But all along, there's been another fighting fiasco, which is probably even more well known than both of those aforementioned embarrassments, as it was constantly advertised in game magazines back in the day that I, ashamedly enough, was jealous over because I didn't own a PlayStation 1 back then. Oof, but why am I tackling it today? Well, you know, there's been far too much goodwill about the world of Dungeons & Dragons recently, so I felt it was high time to balance that out with the unmitigated disaster that was Iron and Blood Warriors of Ravenloft. This was an attempt to expand the world-famous fantasy franchise into the red-hot genre of the fighting game, and is probably also the reason why it was never attempted again. But will it be able to cast a devastating fireball upon Expect No Mercy and reduce its legacy to ashes? Well, we won't know for sure until we get it in the ring! The history of this turd, we're starting off hot, is actually pretty interesting. TSR, the original owners of D&D, had licensed out the property to SSI for a bunch of different computer games throughout the 80s. But once the 90s hit in all its neon glory, Dungeons & Dragons was eventually able to distance itself from the early accusations of it being a satanic communication tool.
This is the teaching of the occult. This is exactly what we were introduced into in Star Wars and E.T.,
thus allowing them to expand their reach even further into other mediums like video games. Not only was mainline stuff getting adapted, but other campaign scenarios / pocket dimensions like Mystara were getting licensed out as well. So TSR granted permission for a fighting game based on the Ravenloft universe to Acclaim and plucky young Take-Two Interactive, who developed Iron and Blood for the PlayStation, DOS, and it was a shit show. The end. Oh wait, that's actually not very interesting at all. Well, fortunately, it ain't the full story. Take-Two, which is now a giant, unfeeling video game conglomerate, came from humble beginnings, developing a select few different titles throughout the 90s, mostly for the PC, before transitioning into their final form as a publisher. Their only console game was Iron and Blood, or should I say Iron Blood, because originally the game was scheduled to come out on Panasonic's ill-fated and non-existent M2 hardware, but wasn't based on D&D at all. But the young developers assigned to the project, who were all mostly fresh out of college by the way, were massive D&D fans and wanted to make a dark fantasy fighting game, but since the idea of actually getting the D&D license was ludicrous, they crafted their own fairly generic universe instead and just dubbed it Iron Blood. Once the M2 was completely obliterated off the face of the earth, Iron Blood was smartly moved over to the PlayStation, where it was unfortunately given a shoestring budget and strict development deadline, and again, for many on the team, this was their first professional project. They attempted to use motion capture to bring the game's combat to life,
which was the style at the time,
hiring performers from the Society for Creative Anachronism to act out the fights. Seriously though, their dedication to their craft is admirable. Anyway, to record the actors' movements, Take-Two used the very early motion capture device known as Flock of Birds, which I last talked about in my KI retrospective, and similar to Rare's experience with the technology, it was a load of garbage that kept breaking down every 5 minutes. So the team were then forced to throw out the very little data they were able to record, and had to go back to animating the characters by hand, which many of them had very little experience with, which, shows in the final product. Then, just a handful of months from the game going gold, Acclaim started to have doubts that Iron Blood was going to light store shelves on fire, unless it had some type of hook. So they contacted TSR and made a bid for a D&D license, and were actually granted Ravenloft, which you might think would have elicited whoops of hype from the team, but it was quite the opposite. Acclaim apparently didn't give them extra development time, so
All they could do was tweak a few names, add a few references, and slap an unfinished Strahd in there at the 11th hour. You know, this guy. While the team behind Iron Blood were indeed all big dorks, I mean D&D fans, suddenly being told, oh, you know that thing you're making as an homage to the thing you really like? Well, now that thing is the official thing, and you're not getting any extra time or money to make that thing. Damn, that's pretty sketchy of a claim, I have to say. Taking the earliest opportunity to pull the wool over everyone's eyes at the last second just to sell a product? Morally dubious? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. But their gamble worked. Despite getting very, very negative reviews across the board, the newly named Iron and Blood Warriors of Ravenloft reportedly sold over 150,000 copies, making a tidy profit for Take-Two and helping to catapult them into the giant soulless machine they now are today. So with that very unhinged thought playing through your minds that this stinker had a small part in popularizing Grand Theft Auto, it's time for us to discuss the... Like most PlayStation games released in this era, Iron and Blood starts off with a grainy CGI intro. It's not bad or anything, but it's not good or anything either. Things kick off, or kick down even further, with some really bare-bones menus and even more dire loading screens. Can't you have a spinning magic orb or missile or a dice or something? There is some improvement when you get to the character select screen though. I mean, damn, look at all these wizards and or warriors. They're all separated into two distinct sides, essentially faces and heels. If they have frowns or fangs, then they're most likely the latter. If they're smiling and have bright colored clothes, then they're the former. Once you've selected one, this weird voice confirms it.
Zenobia, Nimpimply.
He's similar to the announcer from Mace the Dark Age, which I'd much rather be plain, but it's like his goofier younger brother who's just trying to sound cool.
Sasha, Red Cloud, Mordos Call versus Koyasha.
And then there's the game. It's, yeah. As you can see, proportions are way off for pretty much the entire roster. What is this, Rescue Heroes Warcraft Edition? Backgrounds are one simple image and a square surface to fight on, and yeah, that's kinda it. There are the life bars though, or life flames that just, ooh, oh, I'm gonna get to you later. But overall, Ravenloft just looks pretty boring, which extends over to the audio as well. Most tracks don't make much of an impression, and for those that do, well, it's mostly a negative one.
Combination!
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, every time you do a combo, even a two-hit one, you hear that every single time.
Combination!
And again, unlike KI, it's just annoying here because you'll often get situations like these.
Combination! 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 Combination!
All of this blahness is at least slightly offset by full CGI endings, but I use that pluralization loosely because there's only two. See, in campaign mode, the main single-player offering, there's only specific conclusions for the two factions, and oh man, are they ever satisfying. This means, unfortunately, that none of the individual characters have their own endings, which leads to many, i.e. all of them, being rather forgettable. Like, damn, when even Criticom shows you up with better production value, you know you fucked up. Honestly, the only credit I can really give Warriors of Ravenloft here is its substantial 16-character roster, which plumps up to an impressive 20 when you factor in the 4 unlockable bosses. The only problem with so many choices, though, is having to grapple with the... Okay, so Okay. Alright, okay. Iron and Blood has some of the most random, haphazard mechanics I've ever seen. It's a 4-button fighter, quick, medium, strong, and miscellaneous?
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
High and low block, and a sidestep, which is probably the worst sidestep in the history of sidestepping. You move so fast when you do it, circling to the side of your opponent so swiftly that the camera can't keep up, so it doesn't bother. Each character only has 2 special moves and 2 to 3 canned combos, with the rest of their kits composed of random buffs that they can only acquire through winning artifacts off other opponents. Rings of healing, earth tremor, magic tridents, stuff like that. You can only keep these buffs if you don't lose all your lives though. Yes, I said lives. By default, each character has 3, and if they gain any artifacts during them and then die for good, those relics and their associated powers go with them. Now, this would be fine if it was relegated to some sort of extra RPG or roguelike mode, but no, this is how the game works everywhere. You're also required to pick a team between 3 and 6 characters, and with 3 lives as the default, fights go on and on and on until someone's finally declared the winner. I kinda get what they were maybe going for here. D&D campaigns are composed of a whole party who has to go through epic, grueling encounters before conquering the enemy, but this is a fighting game, firstly, and not an RPG, so having matches set up like this slows the whole process down to an unfathomable crawl. Oh, and I didn't forget about you, life bar flames! These are awful in letting players know exactly how much health they have left. Like, these are the worst life bars of all time. You know Battle Monsters, another game that's way better than this? It's the same sort of concept, using candles. But at least they're arranged in a bar-ish form, like, oh, this special attack does 2 candles worth of damage. I mean, that works. It's weird, but it works. But what the hell am I supposed to say about something like this? The most bizarre mechanic though, one that to me at least is unheard of in fighting games, is the fact that some characters have advantages on certain stages while others don't. For example, if you're fighting Sasha, the werewolf, on her stage, she, and only she, can summon a relic for use in that match. Which one does she get? A buff that increases her damage by 50%. Imagine you're playing, I don't know, Street Fighter 6, and whenever you're fighting Ryu on the Japan stage, there's a chance that someone will throw him those weird confectionaries he likes, and he gets a 75% increase in his fireball speed or some shit. Of course, you'll need to find someone who will play Ravenloft with you to take advantage of this insane mechanic, because I don't recall the CPU ever doing it to me, at least as far as I can figure, but still, why would anyone ever think this would be a good thing to add? But then again, I have to ask myself, why would they also add a 100% completely useless training mode? It's essentially 1 round of combat, and if you kill the CPU dummy, you win, and are then asked if you want a rematch or to go back to the main menu. Like, what's the point? Why is there a finite amount of health? And no, there aren't any dummy options, move lists, barely anything that makes this an actual training mode. Following that is the single player campaign, which I've talked about already, and finally the head-to-head option. Why didn't they just add a simple arcade ladder where you select one character, punch Strahd in the ass, and then get your ending? I have no idea. Actually, wait, no, I do have an idea, because Acclaim didn't give them the time or money in which to do so. I can say for certain that when it comes to actual movement and feel, Iron and Blood is not slow at all. It is in fact so blisteringly fast to the point it's barely controllable. Doesn't matter if you're the big executioner guy or the hobbit dude, everyone's fast as fuck, boy, and this extends to everything. The sidestepping, the normal attacks, special moves, etc. Everything comes out at a moment's notice, or not even at a moment's notice, which leads to dumbass shit like this. Oh, yeah, that. See, the stages have these weird force fields that knock everyone down, and it doesn't matter if you're running or dodging or whatever, you always manage to hit them. And when you get knocked down in Ravenloft, you stay down. So horizontal movement is way too jacked up, whereas the ground game is way too slow. Combine this with the really sluggish camera, which never autocorrects to new positions, and suddenly this game starts to look a little bit like another bad fighting game that's way better than this. I next have to address the atrocity that occurs whenever you get turned around. You know, like in Virtua Fighter or Tekken, when your opponent slips behind you and then just takes getting hit or pressing the opposite direction and you're instantly facing your opponent again? Yeah, this is nothing like that. Every single character takes ages to turn their lumbering asses back around with an extended animation, something I don't think I've ever seen before. Like, why? Why is the game so fast in every way but these ways? Most egregious of all though, there doesn't seem to be any push block whatsoever. This is a huge reason as to why Iron and Blood feels as bad as it looks. All you need to do is find one single gangly ass normal and spam the everlasting hell out of it, because like Justin Wong has always said, the key to winning is to abuse shitty tactics over and over like crazy. I honestly think this has to be one of, if not the worst feeling game since Expect No Mercy, because it barely even feels like a dedicated fighting game and more like a bland single-player action-adventure that just so happens to have a bonus versus mode bolted on as an extra. I am struggling to think of any legit positives here, so folks, I think we just might have a contender. What sucks most of all though is that D&D, any scenario or pocket dimension, deserves and has potential to be a good fighting game. Imagine how sick it would have been if Capcom could have taken the sprites they made for their beat-em-ups and made a fighter out of it. Or hell, since Iron and Blood actually sold well, the team could have built a polished sequel from the ground up, especially with the experience they now had. But no, Take-Two execs just made that bag and then transformed into a publisher that's richer than some countries. With that said though, the unfortunate circumstances the team faced, and the fact that for many of them this was their first game, it still doesn't excuse just how poor of an experience this is, how awkward the matches are, and how miserable I was playing it. And it makes me even saltier that thanks to this, we're not going to get Karlach in a fighting game anytime soon, which is bullshit! Alright, calm down. Look, I think my emotions are running a bit high here. They're very heightened. Remember, as a kid, I actually thought this game looked awesome, mostly due to the cover art. So when I realized years later that it was in fact the exact opposite, I felt betrayed. So instead of me casting the final judgment here, let's leave it to the dice to decide. Alright, so a dark shadow looms large over Iron and Blood, and then suddenly comes into view. Expect No Mercy steps out from the darkness, and then casts a dreadful spell that can turn any foe into a blithering idiot by uttering a single haunting phrase.
I have seen the amateur and it is you!
If Iron and Blood is to survive and perform a counterspell, it's going to need to roll a 19 or more. Will they do it? Well, I'll be damned. Folks, friends, and fighters the world over, we have a new champion. Iron and Blood, Warriors of Ravenloft is now officially the worst fighting game. But that doesn't mean it can rest easy, because it shouldn't forget that there's many bad fighting games like it all over the world. And if you know of any contenders that could put up that good fight, let me know in the comments below or sound the battle gong over on my social media. Until then, I'll see you next time, fellow warriors, on the worst fighting game.